Today's scripture lesson is one of those passages in the Bible that pretty much everyone knows, has heard it before. It's the feeding of the 5,000, and the passage is repeated in every gospel. Gospel of Mark's, or a Gospel of John, rather's way of doing it is a little different than Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And we'll hear the words today. I'm going to be reading from verse 1 through 15. Here we go. After Jesus went to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is called the Sea of Tiberias, a large crowd kept following him because they saw the signs that he was doing for the sick. Jesus went up to a mountain and sat down with his disciples. Now the Passover, the festival of the Jews, was near, and he looked up and saw the large crowd coming towards him. And he said to Philip, "Where are you going to go to buy bread for these people to eat?" He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he was going to do. And Philip answered, 6 months of wages would not be enough to buy bread for each of them, even a little. One of the disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a boy here with 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they among this many people?" And Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." Now there was a great deal of grass in the place, so they sat down, about 5,000 of them in all. When Jesus took the loaves, and then when he had given thanks, he distributed to them all who were seated, and also the fish, and they took as much as they wanted. And when they were satisfied, he told the disciples, "Gather up the fragments left over so that nothing may be lost." And so they went and they gathered up the fragments of the barley loaves left by those who had eaten, and they filled 12 baskets. And when the people saw that what had been done, they began to say, "Indeed, this is a prophet who has come into the world." When Jesus realized this, and they were about to come and to force him to make him king, he withdrew again to the mountain by himself. What constitutes, a miracle for you? What's a miracle? What is a miracle? What constitutes a miracle? Lightning coming down from the sky, manna from heaven. There's all kinds of biblical examples of miracles, and parting of the Red Sea, and frankly, I haven't seen any of them. So what's a miracle? In Catholic theology, you can become a saint, but to do that, you have to perform miracles. They have to be witnessed by other people. They have to send long letters to the see in Rome, and they have to vote and decide and say, okay, St. Francis is definitely a saint because he did these things. I think St. Francis was a heck of a guy, whether he did miracles or not. He's still applied for sainthood. In the Protestant world, generally, we call each other saints. We don't have to go through the process of making sure our life has performed a miracle. And so miracles are one of those things that have kind of disappeared from modern society. If you went to your doctor and said, "You'll get better," and you ask why, and he'll say, "It'll be a miracle," I think you'd be looking for a new doctor, wouldn't you? You would count on some kind of rational explanation of what's going to change, and in some way that you can try to fathom it, try to internalize it, mull it over, make a decision, other than someone saying, "Well, it'll be a miracle." It's nothing that really excites us today. It excites people in religious circles when miracles happen, whether a person's healed or something changes. I remember visiting a church in Cuba when I was on the grand tour of Cuba. We went up to this old village that was once the copper center of Cuba. Cuba doesn't have a lot of natural resources, but they had copper in the Spanish era, and so they gouged out this big mountain, and they built a pretty sizable church there that is now a place of pilgrimage for healing. And there's something, if you touch, so you go to and you look at the front of the church, and if you go around the back, you can touched something, and people have said they've been healed there. And to prove it, as you go through this whole area, there are crutches on the wall and a wheelchair here and a walker over there, and so the writing, so the proof is there, so you'll know that something's going to happen. It may well. But miracles for us, I think, are hard to come by and hard to quantify. And I think the miracles that I count on, and the ones that I've seen more than anything, are miracles of relationship. So a woman who was the wife of a person that my dad worked with on the road department was a recluse when I was a child. Never really left their house, always was by herself there, didn't want to, when there were social events, her husband would come, but she wouldn't come. And then all of a sudden, she was sitting in the middle of the row at church one Sunday, which just kind of floored me because I'd known her whole life. And from that point on, she was there every Sunday. She even decided she wanted to become baptized, which was not something that people did as an adult when the church I was growing up in. There wasn't that many baptisms. Actually, they had to go out and find a hot place to do it in the middle of winter, and dipped her in Hot Creek and got her up and had to help her in and out. Transformed. It was like a miracle. Some way, I guess it was a miracle. God spoke to her in the silence of her own home. I don't know what the circumstances was about it, but she was transformed into something else. What she had always probably wanted to be was revealed. It was a miracle. I think about this story a lot. It's in John about the biblical stories of the feedings of the multitude. And I kind of wonder, what is the real miracle here? Is it the miracle of the feedings of the multitudes, the miracle that Jesus somehow magically breaks bread and it just continues to multiply and there's no human interaction with this, but everybody, it's like you reach in the bag and there's one more thing to take out until you've gone through everybody else and everybody's had enough, and then you decide to gather it up and there's a whole bunch more. And then why put this kid into it? Well, there's a couple reasons why. One is it's specifically he's got barley loaves, which is the only bread a Palestinian or a Judean at that time could legally bake. So they grew a lot of wheat in Palestine during Jesus' life, but no one could eat it. It was solely for Roman export. And in fact, you would get in trouble if you were a Judean and you ate wheat. It was an export crop. It was illegal for you as a Judean to eat any of it. So it was gathered up. Barley, which was a rougher grain, if you've ever had barley bread, was for the peasants, were for the people. And so a barley loaf was telling you that the boy who came there was from the peasant class. 2 fish tells you that he was from the Sea of Tiberias, the Sea of Galilee. And so he was a local kid who had just happened to have some food with him, which seems strange to me that only the local kid has some food with him. I remember as a child going on trips with my parents, and my mother normally packed enough food for us as we went off into the wilds of the world. And that's, if you think about your own life, and when your parents were taking you on a trip, someone was bringing food, weren't they? They weren't just going, oh, we'll just live off the fat of the land, wherever we go. And so normally people prepare to do things. Even the crowds that followed Jesus, I believe, were prepared to go out. That they just shouldn't, pick up in a moment's notice and go out and follow Jesus without having any kind of preparation or any kind of forethought about what was going to go on. So let's even assume that everyone brought their own food. Is there any miracle with this at all? I still think there is, because if you see this one child who's willing to give it up, give it to the people up front, and to see it is noticeably shared among those in the front, maybe the people who were watching were motivated themselves to share as well. Sometimes sharing is one of the hardest things that we do as adults. It's easy to share an opinion about what we think about things, but what's really hard to do is to share a resource that's precious to us, whether it's time or money or expertise or whatever else. Most of the things, the commodity that seems to be the highest these days is time. Share your time, because it has an intrinsic value that we put high hope in. Should I share my time? And invariably, when I'm feeling stressed for time, that's when someone wants me to share it. You know, when I'm feeling like I'm that much farther behind and stopping me to get to the door, you know, I just want to tell you one more thing and then you can go. And that one more thing is, 15 minutes longer, and you're standing there, you're kind of looking at your watch nonchalantly, you're kind of trying to end a conversation because you really got to get somewhere. Probably somebody's waiting for you, and you're feeling the pressure of doing it. That time is creeping up on you and you jump away, you get in your car and you get there and you find that nothing has happened. All of the stress that went on to try to get there, to be a part of something else that you had planned to be a part of, when you show up, that it's like, well, we're not really ready for you yet. I don't know how many doctor's appointments I have stressed to be there, that 10 minutes early or something like that, and get myself in the seat. And a half an hour later, I'm still sitting there waiting for my appointment to come due, that was a half an hour ago, for someone to see me. I'll go into the room, and 5 minutes later, I'm kicked out. And I'm wondering, what was going on here? What's the time? Sharing oneself is a difficult process, and I don't think that we really give it as much importance as it really is to us as adults. We tell children to share all the time, don't we? And it's kind of an exercise that we go through with kids, telling them, showing them what it's about. But as far as our own lives and sharing, we don't share as readily as we teach our children to share. We don't share the mental and emotional burdens that are upon us that we carry around, mainly because we are careful about who we do that with and why and how that is spun out in the world. It's not like we just go, this is my life, watch me live it. We want to be careful to know that the people that we share are the details of our lives, or what's important to us, or what's even hurting us, is received in a careful manner, that is held with gentle hands, in which we receive word back that we are okay, that we are a good person, and that there's empathy and sympathy about who we are and what we're doing and how we're living in the world. And we want that reflected back to us from others as well, don't we? And so what happens is we become more and more guarded, to the point where we share less and less about ourselves, and we become much more alone. I find that part of the transformation that our society is in these days is a kind of a strange whipsaw effect, in which on social media people will share things that I think are like, whoa, I didn't want to know that. And the other thing is that people are so guarded at times that we really don't know what's going on inside of them. And they don't really need or desire to really have that kind of intimacy. And what is required with that intimacy is to really let somebody else know who you are and be a part of that person's life. The feeding of the 5,000 is kind of an interesting story, isn't it? It is a miracle, in a sense, that people did what they needed to do. They shared what was important to them, food at the time. But there was more than just the food that was sharing that was the interchange of that group. It was the idea that someone was there who had called them to this place, who had inspired them through action, the sharing of barley, loaves, and fish, but as well as words that really made a difference in those people's lives. So much so, at the end, the author says, well, they wanted to make him king. And so he had to get himself out of there before it turned a direction that he didn't want to go. We encounter Christ in all kinds of different ways of living. Marie, the woman I mentioned off the front of the sermon, found Christ in her house, the only refuge she had at that time in some way that I don't really fathom. But it transformed her into a different person. It really transformed her into a different person. And as a child, I just kind of marveled at it. That all of a sudden, this woman who I had through growing up, probably from 3rd grade until high school, I probably had 3 sentences worth of living with her. All of a sudden, her life was anew and open to us and transformed. It was a miracle. Miracles happen to all of us at different times in our lives. Whether we are the type that count them as that, or call it a lucky coincidence, or don't really even know how to even process this idea that God might enter in our lives and move us in some way that we don't really fully comprehend. But miracles do happen. And you all are a testament to the miracle of life. Someone bore you, and you're here now. And so we live in a world of miracles, I believe. And the way that we respond to it is a way that we respond to our faith in the world. Do we have hope? Do we share? Are we trying to make the world a better place? Amen.